Good morning. It's Morning Oasis. Today is the 24th. It's Tuesday and it's 10 a.m. Good morning. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. I think I am going through whatever my son just got done going through. So I may, over this week, my voice may get a little more hoarse. I might sound a little bit more congested, but that's part of it too, right? That's the whole point of this, is to display for you guys, this is what it looks like to walk every day on your path as a healer. And sometimes we show up at our fullest of selves, sometimes we can't. And that's kind of what today's show is going to actually be about. I don't have any card pulls. You guys, I almost get the impression that you guys would rather I don't do card pulls as a regular thing. Maybe we'll just do them on Fridays. I'll let you guys let me know how you feel about that. Card pulls are fun because they kind of bring us all together. They show us how collectively we're one, how, pulling a random card from a random deck that is like exactly what we need to hear, and seeing how many of us need to hear it also helps us come into that collective more. I wanted to let you guys know, let's check in with the moon, because I think that it's incredibly important to stay in track with our celestial bodies and how they are doing, what's going on with them. We had a energy report from Tiffany Stiles talking about this. Right now we're having all sorts of storms. There's a huge coronal hole right now in the sun that's facing us. Morning, Andrea. Morning, Shauna. And that coronal hole, what that does is it changes the energy that's coming towards us. The sun has basically had a mass ejection, so it's kind of like it shoots out, it's external material, it jets it out, and it comes and arcs back in these big arcs. And sometimes when that happens, if it's a massive ejection, a big amount that's come out, it'll leave a hole in the sun for a while. We have a pretty big one that's facing us right now, and that's part of the solar storm activity. But Friday is the new moon, so we're approaching a new moon energy, and we'll spend the week kind of prepping for that new moon energy. But just know, what is the new moon for you? What does that mean for you? For me, the new moon means that the celestial body is not reflecting back at me. I'm actually able to see it. I'm actually able to see what is behind the light that normally obscures the vision. This brings to mind, I remember I'm always studying, always learning. I study the body a lot. I'm fascinated by the body and how it works. I never miss an opportunity to have a conversation with a doctor or an anatomist or a neuroscientist, and I happen upon them quite often. So clearly the universe has given me a lot of opportunities. I read a lot of books about it. I watch documentaries. It's one of those fascinations I've always held. And had I thought I could actually cut into a vessel, I probably would have gone into psychiatry or psychology, or some sort of practice. I wanted to do psychiatry, but I couldn't. I just couldn't do the anatomy part. I can't cut people open. I just know that about myself. And psychology was a fascination. I studied it while I was going to college. Life got in the way. So anyway, my point being, one of the things that I learned about that I found fascinating was how the eyes actually see things. So when we look at something, for instance, let's just look at my eyeglasses case. So it's got two really bright colors. When we look at it, we think, oh, this object is orange and pink. Easy to describe. It's looking right back at you. See, it's even got little eyeballs inside. I love this. So the actual truth, though, is this object, it absorbs everything except the light frequencies that are in this spectrum of pink. So is this object actually pink? Because what it actually is doing is rejecting pink. And we're seeing that reflection, and that's what's coming through our eyes. is what's rejected by this object. So what color is it? These are this is like one of those things that I'm like, blew my mind. It made me realize, wow, when I'm looking at something, I'm not looking at what that thing absorbs and considers itself to be, what it accepts and receives in and holds within itself. I'm looking at what it rejects from itself, what it reflects back at me, what it can't hold inside of itself. If I want to look at something that holds all color and reflects nothing back at me, well, then I have to look at something that's black. Because all the colors are absorbed, nothing's coming back at me. So it's an interesting concept when you start thinking about that, how we even see, which leads me into what I wanted to talk about today. I'm always working on new projects. My current project, one of my current projects, is I'm reading through the raw material. I don't know if you've heard of this before. And I have been feeling like a part of my work is this material. And one of the things that my development has been very strongly about, in the metaphysical community, my guides don't let me read almost anything. My bookshelves, I have a ton of books about metaphysics. But when I start to read it, what happens normally for me is I pick up the book and suddenly I start getting this kind of a dazed feeling, and I'll start to read and I might get a page in and then I pass out. I fall asleep. Or I can find that I've been reading for pages and pages and pages and I couldn't tell you a single word that had been on any of those pages. So I fought this for a long time. I felt ignorant about this for a long time. I felt ashamed about this for a long time, right? I had all these things that I felt about that. And then I finally just let it go. And what I realized was, well, first of all, as I held the books for me, the knowledge that was relevant to me just kind of came through as two crows fly by. What was important for me came through. What I needed to know would come in meditation. I realized I was actually connecting into the consciousness of this book, right? Because all objects hold a sort of consciousness to them. So I was pulling from this what was necessary and relevant with me. Now, if you are a person who, this is what I've found, if you're a person whose role is to be here teaching in some way, teaching, learning, if you're talking in the raw context, then you are going to be guarded in your filter while you learn, so that you learn to be authentically you. All of the knowledge actually is inside of us. And it's by releasing our need from the external to come to the internal and allowing that knowledge to be in here. So we often get labeled as dyslexic. I was labeled as dyslexic. Yeah, Andrea and Stephanie. I'm right there with you. So, but the truth was, I can read other books just fine. It's when the book material is coming in through a filter, right? Always, every information, every piece of information that's relayed to you, including out of me, is coming through a filter. The filter, or if you're reading the raw, and I'll explain what this is in just a second, a distortion from the pure truth is what we create as we bring information through. Now, every person who writes a novel, every person who teaches or sings or does any sort of presentation of information or knowledge is tapping into that infinite consciousness, is tapping into that ancient inner deep knowledge and is channeling it through. And that's why when you talk to these people, usually they'll say, hey, I'm just a conduit for it. The song just came through me. You know, the story just wrote itself. That's what it is, to tap into that internal consciousness. However, they're going to be applying their filter through it. What that means is that we are always, our vessel is also structured to pre-filter information that comes through. Now, if you're struggling with reading a book, the filter that that information is coming through is not for you. It's too distorted for you. And so the information within the book, the source of the information is calling to you, but the consciousness through which it's translated is not appropriate for you. So let it go. Let go of that guilt and that blame and that shame that you feel about not being able to read these books. The people who are capable of reading those books are the people who are in a similar distortion or similar filter. And they need the information, and for them, the filter's perfect. If you can't find a filter out there that fits you, and you can't find a book that you can read that fits you, perhaps you're supposed to be filtering the information yourself and creating the book. So now I'm going to talk about what the raw book is, what the raw material is. This is actually a series of books, The Law of One. In the 1960s, a group of people got together. Good morning, Elena. A group of people got together, and I'm not going to get too into the details because you can read it in the book yourself. So they got together in the 60s and they started channeling together. In the 60s, you know, one thing that we forget really easily in our current modern arrogance and ignorance of the past is that the generation that was alive during the early 1900s, like I think it was the 1980s through the 1920s, was called the Transcendental generation, the Transcendental generation. So this metaphysics, this has been around for a really long time. This is not new. This is ancient knowledge, ancient material. We're only re-delivering the information through our current modern filter. So remember that. It's really important to remember that so that we can keep our humility, so that we can keep our centered groundedness. The more we go into a state of righteousness or arrogance or any sort of feeling of validation because we pull the information in, the further we're getting away from our centered self state. That just came through. So it's really important, and it's something that gets stressed over and over if you're listening to any of these concepts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Alex. You know, when we really tap into ourselves, we don't need it anymore. So this group of people in the 60s, they got together by about, I think it was 1981. Yeah. Here he says, on January 15th, 1981, our research group began receiving communication from the social memory complex RA. From this communication precipitated the Law of One and some of the distortions of the Law of One. Pages of this book contain an exact transcript, edited only to remove some personal material of the communications received from the first 26 sessions with Ra. Now, Ra consciousness, we've heard this term before, comes from Egypt, right? The Ra consciousness is a social memory complex. What does that mean? It's a collective consciousness, right? The Ra consciousness is a collective. It's a group of consciousnesses that consider themselves to be one consciousness. Now, this consciousness group has been coming back and helping us throughout our history. In these talks, there's a lot of questioning. I mean, a lot of questions. So many people aren't capable of reading this because the material is extremely complex. You have to have a certain type of filter set for it to come through comfortably. Otherwise, it's a struggle. So many people are not going to find themselves able to read this book just like. So I'm not telling you to read it, but if you feel compelled to, pick up the first one and just start. I listened to them first. They're available on YouTube. There's a couple of different people who have transcribed it so it's spoken out and you can listen to it that way. What I found when I would do that was I actually, just like with reading, I wasn't listening to the book, but I ended up going into deep meditation, and I would end up in consciousness communication with these beings. how I know that to be true is that as I've been evolving, and now my filter is quite clear. I'm quite clear on what role I've come here to play. I now am being released and I'm able to start reading more. So I've been going through the book, and what I've been doing is highlighting and making notes. And my plan is to release a raw talks through filter, right? So through my filter, my conversation, and I'm highlighting areas where it's validating and confirming information from things that I've been getting or things that I didn't get clear enough, which is why we seek out external information. So that's what these raw talks are. One of the things that I found interesting, so, the raw consciousness, when they're asking about, have you helped us before, they say they've come in 3 different times. And each of those times they came in, they taught the information, and the people who they delivered the information to deified themselves. Or as the information was passed from them into the major populace, there were those who would deify themselves. So with that knowledge, and use it as a control mechanism. And so each time they would end up leaving because the distortions became so great. Now, an interesting thing too, there's a side note. There's all these subtle references that are in here that I find fascinating. Because as I went through my course, my process of trying to put together the spiritual, the metaphysical, the extraterrestrial, all of these pieces, the ancestral pieces together that were coming through, because for me, I started channeling kind of memories from the beginning of creation on. As I woke up, it was very confusing, and what brought it into wholeness was actually tapping into first the Egyptian culture, really studying and learning so much about that over the last 10 years, and then switching up into how that culture truly is replicated throughout Christianity, throughout Islam, throughout Judaism, as well as replicated again if you look into India or South America and the deep South American cultures. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Okay, finding these correlations, seeing how all these things are put together, and then reading here the places that I'm all like, wow, something landed there. They landed there. They came in the physical form. And what happened when they came in that physical form, in order for them to materialize here, their consciousness, the vibrations of their consciousness made their bodies into what looked like this bird being, this bird man. That's why bird men are in all cultures. In every human mythos you find a bird man. And that's the Ra. So they've been with us for a really long time. And even the raw consciousness, who views themselves as a social memory complex and holds all of this information, still says they're trying to find their way into oneness with the infinite creator, with the infinite consciousness. So this is a journey, this is a process. Those of you who have this fear or thought that the ascension in this vessel, this lifetime, is going to be like, manifesting into a piece of God, we're in a process. We're one piece in this process. So releasing that idea of, yes, you are God. Yes, you are God. I am God. And so are you. And therefore, neither of us is more special than the other. We are both exactly amazing creatures and divine beings. So there is no special. There's no better than. There's no worse than. It doesn't matter how you identify yourself as separate from the other person. Those are the distortions that make you. Those are the filters that make you who you are. And that's what the raw consciousness is talking about in the first part of this talk, which I'm going to kind of share some of it with you. One of the things that they said, I love how they talk about this process of they never reference just being a teacher or just being a learner. And this is why you see me repeat this. It's always you're in a teacher-learner role, which means that your primary function is to be teaching, and your always secondary function is to be learning as you are teaching. Because what I teach, I'm learning always. What comes through, I'm like, oh, that's good. I didn't know that, right? So Jesse, as the human, is always learning as the consciousness is tapping into that infinite consciousness. And another thing that they say is that when one decides to ask for this knowledge of what it is to be a healer, how is it to heal? What do I do to heal myself? And how do I help others heal? They're asking for something that bears great responsibility. If you ask it, you have the responsibility then to teach it, to share it, to open it out. This is repeated in the Quran, where basically the God tells the people in the book, if you can read this book and you understand what it says, it's your responsibility to teach it, because all of the creation cannot understand. And they require you, as one who can hold the light on that path back into Godhood, to share it with them, to share your light. And what we have done as a culture over and over and over and over again is to get our light, and then we're all like, okay, well, how much are you going to pay me for it? Or, okay, how much can I control with this? Okay, if I give him this much light, I can make him go that way. And then if I give him this much light, I can make him go that way. So we as beings, we have to resist that piece of the urge, that piece of it. It's a struggle. That doesn't mean that we aren't doing work and that we don't have a separate role as a worker, right? That's separate. The divine knowledge must be allowed to flow through. The work that we create, our job, that's separate. Even the prophets had jobs. Oftentimes they were carpenters or masons or workers with the earth, workers with creation. Oftentimes we have to live in this social memory complex that we call humanity, right? That's part of it until it transitions out of that. So these are two separate subjects. However, one of the things that they ask the raw consciousness, they point out that each person, each type they call us, must pursue its own learning and teaching in this area. The idea of universal consciousness is why I love these live feeds. I love the idea that we're watching and participating. I agree, Stephanie, that's exactly why I did do this. Oh, shiver, chill of confirmation. Thank you. I think if we're all coming into this one consciousness, the more we do that, the stronger it gets. So, one of the things, I thought this was really interesting. Ra talks about that there are two different kinds of people who can heal others, who are capable of doing that work. He calls them distortions. He says, those such as yourself who have the innate distortion towards knowledge giving of the law of one, but show no significant distortions toward the law of one in mind, body, or spirit, yet and nevertheless have opened the channel to the same ability. So what he's saying is that there are people who have the innate, the inborn ability where they can predispose to understand this law of one consciousness, but they don't actually embody it. They don't adapt it into their lifestyle. They don't embody it in their bodies, their minds, or their spirit. The raw consciousness always refers to us as mind-body-spirit complex, or the mind-body-spirit, or the mind-body energy. Always bringing these bringing in the consciousness as well as the physicality. So he's saying that there are some who do that. And if those ones who bring in the knowledge and teach it but don't embody it, they will eventually have to leave the path of healing, because the distortions will become so great that they will disrupt the healing work of those around them. We all have seen that happen with healers. We've watched that occur. And the problem is that as we channel the information and others begin to pick it up from us or through us, they begin to deify the person bringing the information in. Once that occurs, the whole complex gets knocked off. If the person sitting in that role does not continue to hold their work on the internal, does not continue to do that internal work, remove themselves from that diocese and step down and come back amongst the complex. Being one with the complex is critical. What I keep forgetting to mention, and they keep reminding me, is when they said that they came 3 times before in physicality, the raw consciousnesses, that each time that occurred. So then they came in through a consciousness, through a channel, and they said these distortions continued from Egypt, South America, until Muhammad cleared many of the distortions from the teachings. So this is why the Islamic people, the state of Islam, believe themselves to be the one people, because they've been following the one consciousness. They've been following the law of one since since their inception. This law of one goes all the way back into Egypt and even beyond, back into Atlantis and beyond into Lemuria. This is the path into collective consciousness. So we've been learning this, and we've learned it over and over and over. And that's one of the reasons that I felt so like, oh, that's why I was led to read the Quran, because I'm not a religious person at all. And once I started reading the Quran, it became important to start reading the Bible as well. Oh, yes, I see the distortions. Oh, yes, I see the filters. Oh, this is that one knowledge. This is that cohesive knowledge, the strand that goes between all of these things. And one of the other things they talk about, and then the first type are those who seek, serve, and are willing to be trained in thought. So the first type was the ones who have the innate knowledge, the innate ability to process the information and to share it, and they don't internalize the work. The second are those who have the innate knowledge, the innate ability, and they first internalize the work, and then they external, and then they internal, and then they external. That's the second type. So he says, therefore, those the first type who seek to serve and are willing to be trained in thought, word, and action are those who will be able to comfortably maintain the distortion towards service in the area of healing. So those who internalize the work are going to stay comfortable doing service work for the duration. That's why it's so important to make sure you are always doing the internal work first. Always, if you notice that you have released from that whole balanced state, that you are triggered and pulled out of alignment, you must first work on self and come back into alignment. Then you may serve again. It's when we stay out of alignment and continue to serve that we distort the message and that we create conflict and trouble and all of those things, which also is perfect, right? It's all perfect. So, and that's another thing they mention. So when they asked them, how do we do this? How do we start? What do we even do? Ra says, first, the mind must know itself. This is perhaps the most demanding part of healing work. Consciousness is the microcosm of the law of one. And it continues on. The second part has to do with the disciplines of the body complex. We get a little bit lost in thinking that that means just that the body must be skinny or physically fit. That does help. That is an important thing. But in the Raw talks, they don't even mention that. What they talk about is balance between love and wisdom in the use of the body in its natural functions. So if we love our body will reflect as it's supposed to. And I can attest to that. My body has been like melting slowly as I learn to love myself more. The greater my self-love, the less I carry on my physicality. The less my self-love, the more my physicality grows. Because it's showing me I need to love myself this much. And that's the whole thing, right? But it's balancing love and wisdom. Now that reminds me of also when we look at like imagery from Buddhism, they have the Bodhisattva with a little pearl here and a pearl here, and rainbow light radiating out from both of those places. It's the balance between these two things, bringing us back into that concept of polarity, these two sides, bringing them into one. And Ra talks about that actually in here. The third is the spiritual area, and this requires the attainment of contact with intelligent infinity. Now, you know that time when we're doing our meditations together and we tap into that source consciousness, we go up into that light and we feel that ping, that opening? That's the infinity consciousness. That's what we're doing here, folks. Isn't that amazing and beautiful when you hear it that way? So we're doing this work. We're doing self-work. We're showing up for each other as a social complex. We're recognizing that you are me and I am you. And we are tapping into the infinity consciousness as we flow it through in these moments, this hour a day. How frickin' awesome is that? Really? Like, awesome. And when you read these things and you get that kind of a confirmation of the work that you're doing just naturally, inherently, that's how you know you're on the right path. So if you pick up a book and you can't read it, it's not your filter. It's too distorted for you. Keep looking internally. And when you're ready for the confirmation of what you've been getting internally, the book or another filter's impression or translation will show up. So another piece that they talk about, he goes into talking about how does a healer actually help another person. And this I love because this is really, it's making me feel more comfortable again calling myself a healer. Because what they say is that healing is an intensely intimate process, one that must be done by the individual. What a healer does is serve as a catalyst to support them in connecting to the infinite consciousness. And that's like all I do. I feel like that is what my work has led me towards, is recognizing how important it is just to get people connected to source consciousness. That's what I call it. You may call it God, you may call it Allah, you may call it the one creator, you may call it anything that you choose. But that's the goal, is to get every single one of us aware that we're the ship and we're in the cosmic ocean that is our collective consciousness. If we're all thinking in those terms, if we're all aware in those terms, we can move forward as a collective much more easily and gracefully. So our jobs as healers is to just serve as that catalyst wherever we can. Now, when we look at the teachers, right, our teacher-learner jobs, that's different. That's what we're going to be how we do the work of showing up and supporting the complexes as they release their distortions and their filters. How do we support various people as they release the idea that I am not the other person? There's a lot of different information in here that is so freaking awesome and amazing. Oh, here's one more thing. I've underlined a lot of stuff, but I'm only going to talk about some of it. So healing occurs when the mind-body-spirit complex realizes deep within itself that the law of one, or realizes the law of one. That is, that there is no disharmony, no imperfection, that all is complete and whole and perfect. Thus, the intelligent infinity within this mind-body-spirit complex reforms the illusion of body, mind, or spirit to a form that's congruent with the law of one. The healer acts as an energizer or catalyst for this completely individual process. One item which may be of interest is that a healer asking to learn must take the distortion understood as responsibility for that ask receiving. This is an honor duty which must be carefully considered in free will before the asking. So what they're basically saying there is that once you tap into that whole infinity consciousness and recognize you are one with it, fully internally, truly know that you're one, even with that person that you can't stand, that is your negative polarity. You're the same. And it's by giving yourself permission to have those aspects with which you despise and reject in others, to see that they're part of you too. You do it too, just in a different way. That's the only way to come into wholeness and heal. That's it. So that's what we've been doing here, is looking for how do I reject myself by rejecting others. That's the mirror work that we were working on last week. That's the continued work that we're doing this week, is finding that balance, finding that connection. And here's just a quick little review. What are the 3 steps? First, the mind must know itself. We've got to get in here and let it come all the way into here and bring that heart down into, that head down into our heart. Bringing those into oneness. How do I balance my thoughts with my feelings? How do I balance my hurt with my understanding, my awareness with my longing, right? How do I bring these things together? And that's one of the reasons that when you read, if you do choose to read that, you'll find that so many things are linked in that way. Honor, duty, right? And honor is something that we take on because we're like, oh my God, it's such an honor to do that. It feels good to us. It reinforces our role, our love, an honor is something that we feel we're bestowed with. And a duty is something that we are obliged to, we must do, right? They're the 2 sides of the same coin, but we must bring them together. And that's one of the reasons that they talk that way. So today, okay, so the mind must know itself. Consciousness, I love that. Consciousness is the microcosm of the infinite one. Balancing the body between love and wisdom and spiritual contact with the intelligent infinity. Those are your 3 key steps. Get to know this and this. Bring them into balance. Balancing the body. Knowing this and this. Balancing it. And connecting into that infinite consciousness. And at one point in there, he even talks about, how we have that infinite consciousness is that upward moving energy, and that connection into this creation is that downward moving energy. We can call that Gaia for us, and Source. Those are the language. That's the distortions that we've been using to describe those things. So today I thought what we could do is take a little bit of time to find that balance in ourselves. So we're going to look at polarity, and we're going to, what's polarized for you, and we're going to use a balance. We're going to bring in that balance. One of the things this reminds me of too, is just bringing up an image for me. In Egyptian mythology, they believe that when you die, you face Thoth, or Ra, and he has a scale, and there's what is it? Your heart is weighed against the weight of a feather or something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but is your heart light enough for you to get past? Is your heart in balance with this feather, right? So we're trying to lighten all the things that make our hearts heavy, that make us feel weighted down, that make us feel like we're down here. And that's what this year is going to be about, is that release, that big, great release. Last year was kind of breaking up the rubble, making it all these rigid structures that just couldn't work anymore, breaking them down. This year is going to be kind of releasing and letting ourselves come up and free and lift up out of that. Okay, so that's what today's meditation is going to be about. Go ahead and find yourself in a comfortable position. Get ready. I'm going to take a sip of my smiling coffee. And today I thought we could use this stone to help us Let's see if I can. It's a it's a quartz cluster. What I love about this stone is that it has on the bottom of it, it kind of looks a little bit like a yin and yang, and it still has the stone with which the quartz grew off of, was anchored to, rooted in. So we've got rooted earth and this reaching up cluster. I use this a lot for consciousness connection work, especially with people who have any kind of damage with their connection. We're going to use this one for that. And for grounding, to support the grounding work, we're going to use some obsidian. And this is some obsidian that I harvested in Glassy Butte. I have a lot of obsidian around me. Lots of obsidian. So I'm going to hold these two pieces in our balance, our grounding and our connection. Okay? So take this moment to go ahead and feel your roots already reaching down, because that's what we do when we come in. We start our grounding already. Feel them reaching down. And reaching out as we reach for each other in this great big forest, serving as the mother trees, seeding our knowledge and our awareness into the forest through our roots. Continue reaching until you touch each other. If you're using your compass, you can ask your compass to give you that ping, that yes. If you don't know what the compass is, just imagine that you know, because you do. Feeling that grounding energy, that flush, that liquid flow up through the body as it's drawn up, just like the roots draw the nutrients up through the body. And we're going to ask, as we bring the energy up, for our body to show us where there's imbalance. And if you need to, you can hold your hands. Some people this works for. Hold your hands out like this. And when you find somewhere that's imbalanced, ask your hands to kind of feel heavy. And you can ask things like, is it my masculine and feminine energy in this space that's imbalanced? Is it my love or my wisdom that's out of balance? Am I holding debris of a belief there? Ask some questions. Get curious about it. Where's the energy stopping? Where's the imbalance showing itself, manifesting? As you bring the energy up and through, is it showing you memory flashes or ideas? Are you having thoughts run through your head of a certain thing? This is not distractions. This is information. Are people coming around physically to interrupt you? Is the connection getting broken? These are imbalances. They're showing you. Just observe. Remember, coming into awareness creates that balance between the manifestation and the connection. Just be aware and flow that energy. Taking note of these places as we bring it up through the legs. A lot of us have stuff in our legs. Often get stuck there, especially in our knees, which we know from yesterday, that's rigidity, stubbornness. So we're going to bring that up through the seat. And remember, rigidity and stubbornness just needs to be balanced with supreme fluidity and receptiveness. Thinking of receptiveness and fluidity as we bring it into that rigidity and allowing them all to exist, all to be within one. as we observe, allow to come through from these consciousnesses, our manifestation consciousness, our creator consciousness. Allow that knowledge to come through of what's required for balance, what's lacking, or what's in too much abundance. Just play with these concepts, you guys. Just play with it. Get curious, full of wonder and awe as you find more parts of yourself to fall in love with. That's what we're doing. Looking for ways to fall in love with the whole creation that we are. Okay? So come into the center, bringing that energy up through the root, calling into focus anything in our root chakra, our root system that keeps us out of balance. Any issues involving our safety, our home, being held and loved. Show us these issues and show us their balance. Note this is only the beginning for you of this exploration. We're not completing anything. We're opening, continuing, beginning. Completion is way, way down there. So let go of the idea of completion too. Completion implies it's not complete already. So letting go of the idea that you must have your root completely healed and balanced before you can move on, thanking the root for showing you what it's ready to show, moving up into that sacral space. Feel that sacral space. Ask to be shown what is out of balance, what is out of alignment in this space, and what is needed to create balance. Allowing Source to bring in from the depths of inside of you, exploding and blossoming out inside of you, the balance of your creativity and your passion, your love, the way you support your family, your friends, your tribe, who you are within your village. All of these are in your sacral and much more. Allowing that balance to flow up into your third chakra, your solar plex. Your sense of who I am. Who am I as a unique manifestation of the greater complex? Who am I outside of the collective? Who am I as an individual? What did I come here to do, and how do I balance that with the oneness, with the wholeness, with all the rest of the creation's oneness? Allowing yourself to be shown where the balance is lacking and how it can best be supported and brought back into balance. Allowing this to be a fluid state at play. Thanking the body for showing you, and bringing that energy up and focus into the heart space, into this expansive heart chakra. Bringing in that connected consciousness and that grounded consciousness to show us where the balance is lacking in our heart space. And how we love ourselves as we love the creation, and allow it to show us where the imbalances are and what is necessary for balance at this point. in this moment of perfection. And just allowing, as you release the filters that define you as separate, less than, greater than, more powerful, more disempowered, more righteous, more moral, more accepting. Seeing we all are together in this. We are the vessel. Bringing that focus up into the throat chakra, coming up into that space from which we speak and share our filter, looking for how is this out of balance? Are we speaking our truth? Are we allowing our truth to flow? Can we step out of the way of speaking and allow source to flow? Getting into the throat chakra. Ooh, so many of us shut this puppy down. The other thing is, you guys, as you open your throat chakras up and you're doing more speaking or flowing more of this true communication, recognize balance is also not flowing sometimes too. And allowing the flow for another as you bring the flow through you. Allow to be shown the balance. What is balance in the throat chakra? Bringing that focus up into the third eye, into that sixth chakra. How we view, how we see, how we connect to, how we interpret, how we think about. Our master gland is here, right? And that pineal gland, the great communicator with crystalline resonance, where we translate all energy into physicality, bringing that source in through these glands, allowing that to come through. How do I find more balance between my thought and my heart and my thought, allowing these to balance. Seeing that they can play together and interplay. Bring that focus up into the crown, up into that connection space. Feeling that upward connection. How can I balance the connection, the flow, the Godhood that I hold with the earthly manifestations with which I express in? How do I balance this crown and this root? My flow and my expression, my intake and my outtake, my polarity. How do I bring that into balance? Allow the information to come through, remembering that as you seek this knowledge, you need to share it through your distortion. And we're just going to flow this for a few minutes together before we sign off. Now balance me with you. Know that I am you, and you are me. Bring us into wholeness together, oneness, with every other one who's here with us, who will join us at any point in the future, who will come to us from the past, as they seek their own knowledge and understanding. big energy flowing. Make sure you're well grounded. When you choose to come out of the space, come out of it calmly. Give yourself time to readjust and readapt to the physicality. And try to hold as much of this energy as you can as you go through your day. I rarely request this, but I'm going to ask that each of you who watch share today's video, because everyone that we can get connecting, tapping in, tuning in, joining this collective, the collective that is that infinite consciousness, the better this whole process will be. Let's be catalysts together. If you don't want to share, I understand. I will not hold it against you, but I would appreciate it. And if you choose to share from your own distortion, your own filter, share your own understanding, your own awareness of what it is to connect and balance, that's beautiful and perfect too. Thank you guys for showing up. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll work on some more stuff.